Okay.
Hello Wasteland survivors and mushroomed mudbeards, and today I want to go ahead and get into covering the very first episode of Season 2 of The Last of Us. There isn't a real structure to this video format. It's going to be sort of breakdowns and comparisons to the game, as well as just giving my thoughts as a whole on the adaptation. I'll give sort of a mini review for Season 1 at the end of this video, and at the end of Season 2 I plan on doing a full review of the adaptation as a whole. That being said, as someone who's been a fan of the games for so many years, I can't really talk about the show without getting into comparisons to the game a lot, so if you're a show-only viewer, we will get tie-ins to the games quite a bit. I'll try to save spoilers for the ends of the videos and where the story could be going, and try to keep it focused on the episode and what we got in the beginning half of the video, as well as provide a warning for when I transition into more spoiler territory. There's also going to be some spoilers just based off of the trailer. I have a reaction to it down below, but a lot of what I talk about will be based on what we see in the trailer. That being said, since this video is kind of loosely structured, if there's more things you'd like to see touched upon or talked about within these videos, then let me know. I'm open to suggestions. Either way, let's go ahead and get into it. So, as we see in the trailer, this looks like a pretty action-packed season, especially for Ellie, which is why I thought it was really smart to start off the episode in a fight scene. See, a big problem a lot of fans can have the bigger a franchise can get is the realistic nature of fight scenes, and a lot of people are quick to assume that just because you're smaller than an opponent means you should be getting bodied by them every single time. And while yes, of course, there is a statistical difference in size, there also is a difference in skill. Being small, nimble, and fast can definitely outweigh someone larger than Being small, nimble, and fast can definitely outweigh fighting someone who is Being small, nimble, and fast can definitely be a way to... Gosh, I'm gonna blow my brains out. Being small, nimble, and fast is definitely a useful skill set to have when facing larger opponents. And we saw that within this opening scene. Ellie utilizing the skills she's learned, her swiftness, and the pain of the actual opponent to maneuver him into a position where he had to tap out. You can also see that she was using everything she had, so locked into the fight that she didn't even realize he was already begging to be tapped out. But an interesting thing to know is the fight does start with her getting knocked to the ground. No matter how quick you are or how nimble you are, a punch, especially from someone of that size, will still do some damage. And while we see it definitely did affect her a little bit, they also did allude to the fact that he was holding back his punch. And I really enjoyed Ellie's reaction to this, getting very mad that somebody was babying her. I think the only person she'd ever let take care of her is Joel, which is what makes their awkward relationship at the start of this season very interesting. In the opening of the episode, it picks up right from where Season 1 had left off. However, I was so convinced that this opening of the episode was a recap that I was talking over their entire dialogue. Now, I'd already seen it multiple times just through the games and through the show, so I wasn't too worried about missing anything, but you can see that this is the exact moment where the awkwardness of their relationship really starts. also thought it was really smart as a whole to open the entire episode from Abby's perspective. And we could tell by the pendants and the conversation that they were having that her and those group of people she was with were involved somewhat with the Fireflies and knew about Joel and the events of last season. But I'll touch more on the implications of this later in the video. We get introduced to a character from the games named Dina. She has a very different introduction here, being given a solid scene with Joel. And I'll just say, having Dina be played by Isabella Merced and Joel being played by Pedro Pascal and getting a scene with both of these two powerhouse actors talking together was really cool, especially considering that outside of the performances, both these characters are very iconic. Something that was lacking a little bit from the games was more of a relationship between Joel and Dina. So I like how the show kind of builds a dynamic between them. We get another amazing game comparison when Ellie is out shooting with Tommy. See, within the games this takes place at a different part of the story and an entirely different season, but I like how they utilize it within this narrative to make sense within the episode. It's a very wholesome scene that provides a lot of bonding between Ellie and Tommy, played by Gabriel Luna. Tommy is one of my favorite characters, if you couldn't already tell, and I'm excited to see his character's arc throughout this season. But what's interesting is within their conversation, you can also pick up more context behind who Joel is as a character. Both of them completely understanding who Joel is as a person and how he's affected each of them individually. Showing the different tethers between all the different characters really does help build the community aspect of the narrative. We then get an amazing sequence recreating one of the first missions of the game where Ellie and Dina go off on a scouting mission and happen to go across a supermarket. The only difference being this time they were actually part of a scouting group and led by somebody. Now this is where the show and the game takes kind of a different direction within the narrative. Within the game, Ellie and Dina get a lot of time to bond and talk to each other. We also get a little bit of clues of how the scouting missions work and their systems within Jackson. And while that isn't necessary for the plot, and we did get some very solid bonding moments between Ellie and Dina within the show, I did really appreciate that once they saw the dead corpse, the first thing I thought of was where would the truck be? And my brain was trying to correct itself and saying this is more of a video game mechanic and you didn't need the characters to actually climb a truck and get into the building that way. But this is exactly what ends up happening, so seeing them do this just really did solidify the adaptation aspect of the show. It also is surprising to me because thinking back, there's not many shows or movies where characters climb things. There's always a moment where a character is stuck somewhere like in an alley and simply won't climb to get out. And then we get a very intense sequence after Ellie happens to fall through the floor of the supermarket where she ends up facing off with another infected. This one much creepier, faster, and more agile than the others. They end up talking about it later and it pretty much boils down to being what we call a stalker. And again, while I did watch the games as they released years ago, and at this point have recently replayed the games myself, I don't remember facing an enemy like this, at least one that could crawl on top of things like that. Either way, visually, it was a very cool scene to watch. And led to another moment where Ellie gets bit yet again. Visually, very interesting to see one of the actual cordyceps fungi tendrils wiggling around from the bite room. That being said, it does bring up the question, Ellie has now been bit 2 more times than her original bite. Once back in season 1 on the arm, I believe, and then once now on the torso. There's a lot of theories going around how the infection works, and Game Theory themselves have put out a video on the cordyceps infection and what it could be doing to Ellie long term. And while I could make a video on it, maybe I will, I do think that if the show does lean this direction and Ellie gets a little bit angrier, I think maybe getting bit this many times isn't necessarily the best thing for her. This is not a spoiler because there's no confirmation of any of this is more just a theory. But keep an eye on Ellie's temperament throughout the show. Cut back to Jackson, where Joel is officially seeing his therapist. Within the trailer we saw that this could be happening, and I thought maybe this would just provide some conflict or self-reflection for Joel as a character to maybe think or contemplate on some of his actions he took last season. However, I will say the way the actual scene played out was much more interesting than I originally anticipated. See, it turns out their connection to each other was a lot more severe than we thought. Interestingly enough, apparently, per his therapist, Joel had been the one to kill her husband, Eugene. Who, if I am correct, Eugene within the games was a character we never actually got to meet, but we got to see some of his hideouts throughout the scouting runs. And he's very popular for his growing of marijuana. There was also an interesting note that you got to see some of his background and history and some of the notes he left behind, and he was a bit of a survivor. But again, we never got to meet this person within the games, so I'm kind of wondering what's going to happen there with the narrative. I do think some trailer shots are indicative of where this story arc could actually go. One of my favorite aspects of this therapy session is when Joel is confronted in what guilt he is actually carrying and why he's not actually talking about it. You can see Pedro's amazing acting skill in all of the emotions and everything at the peak ready to burst, and then the moment he compartmentalizes, well, however you pronounce that word, all of his emotions into a little box. It's really interesting to watch the cold stone stoic behavior take over and him walk out of the therapy room. It also is very resembling of Joel as a character. He's not someone who approaches situations with emotions or forethought. He really approaches it with physical instinct and physical reaction. Another scene that's indicative of this is when he finds Ellie's guitar. You could tell that there's a very awkward attempt at starting a conversation and the tension just kept building. However, once Joel sees the guitar, in his mind, the way that he can provide for her and show his love is to be able to fix it real quick. Him not even taking the time to explain, just rushing off to go and get it done. And I really liked Ellie's reaction here. See, all episode she's been a little bit ornery, a little bit more than the games I'd even say, and while that doesn't necessarily turn me away from the character, I fully expected her in this moment to kind of snark at him a little bit. But I think you can see the realization in her face that it is a little bit weird and irritating that he just rushed out like that, but he probably is doing it as an attempt to get close with her. And the way that's illustrated really does prove that Bella does earn their performance in this show. It does bring in the question though, and it's something I was thinking about. How did the same guy who's playing Joel right now also play off a character like this? That being said, we eventually get another remix of scenes from the games in the Ellie and Dina which is the actual dance. And the opening shot of this was absolutely perfect. I loved the remix of it. As well as the fact that this moment between both Ellie and Dina was very wholesome and very reminiscent of the games. And I like how Bella is able to balance between being so aggressive and hostile with everybody and the awkward, shy quirkiness she has around Dina. This scene also does further solidify the dynamic between Dina, Ellie, and another character in Jesse. Jesse in this adaptation is actually played by young Mazzino, who if you didn't know was actually in a show on Netflix called Beef. Very spectacular show. Point is, he captures the very chill, low-key vibe of Jesse very well. I especially liked his moment with the scouting run when he kind of got up close to Dina and Ellie and was kind of a little bit sincere with them, despite the fact that he is also such a chill dude. See, Jesse's an interesting character because he is very nonchalant about a lot of things, but you can see these small little moments within his character throughout the games where he does kind of take things a little seriously. He's got a really good heart, and I feel the actor perfectly replicates the vibe he gives. This leads us to another scene of the pipes, which were being worked on earlier in the episode and seem to have had roots growing within them. My first thoughts, along with many others, was, is there going to be fungus in there? And of course, by the end of the episode, there was. This also segues us to another shot where we can see Abby and her crew looking at Jackson. And with that, we're officially stepping into spoiler territory for the games and where this season could be going, so if you want to avoid it at all costs, turn off now. Abby's character, being played by Caitlin Dever, is going to be very interesting to watch this season. And anybody who watches this channel and maybe sees the narrative play out and doesn't like what Abby does, if you message or mess with Caitlin Dever or anything like that, please unsubscribe. Don't even look at the channel anymore. I don't want any part of it. Constructive criticism is fine. Providing feedback is cool. However, these actors are just doing a job, so we don't accept that kind of behavior here. I was someone who was very much a fan of Abby in the games, mostly because I'm contrarian, and a lot of people hated her when the games came out. I mean a lot, and I'm saying even before the games came out. I did really enjoy both games. There's nothing I would change too much about the first one, and for the second game, I think gameplay-wise it was much better than the first one, and I think narratively its only problem was the chronological order of things. And yes, while I personally would have liked certain characters to live or certain characters to die, I feel at that point you're just writing a different story altogether. I can accept what story they're trying to tell me, I just don't like the way it was displayed. Still, even though the chronological order was a little bit iffy, it didn't necessarily throw me out of the entire game as a whole, and I still very much enjoyed it. This season, we are likely to get a golfing scene between Joel and Abby, and I thought it was super smart to start off the episode with Abby's perspective. But what's more interesting is they didn't cut into the actual sequence of events of Abby's immediate aftermath. We didn't get to see why she's so angry. We didn't get to see what happened in that whole compound from Abby's perspective, just the aftermath. So it not only tells us who Abby is as a character, where she's going, and what her intentions are, but it also leaves enough of the emotional context of that sequence to be able to put within the story a little bit later. Aesthetically, I think a lot of shots and moments were recreated so well from the game, whether it be the actual dance, whether it be Jackson, or even the dog in the month of July on the supermarket chart. All of these moments really do just feel like a pat on the back. And the reason I'm able to accept them so much is because I am someone who, sorry if this offends you, does prefer the games. I just like the way the cinematography, the narrative, the aesthetics, and the structure, and even the environment of the games is more than the actual show. And to be fair, there's a lot of limitations within making a TV show. With a game, you have a lot of control over the visual aspect of it, but I can commend the show for recreating a lot of those visual aspects when they can. My mini season 1 review is I thought the first season was a really solid adaptation, but not just due to some limitations of making a show, I think they took some creative narrative liberties that just didn't really sit with me that well. That being said, I do prefer the games. I'm a big Ashley Johnson fan. I've already said I like the aesthetic a lot more within the games, and that will always be one of the stronger favors I have, at least by the ends of season 1. But I'm also completely comfortable with the fact that the Ellie I got in the games is the perfect version of the character in my mind, and seeing any other version is kind of just like seeing a different version of Superman. But again, I'll get more into that into my actual Bella video. For now, I will say episode 1 was a very strong foundation. It was a very surprising part to end it at, especially considering I think we only get 7 episodes this season, and while I wish this would have been a 2-part premiere or something like that, I do really enjoy what we got. So far, it seems they're tackling the narrative well, and I'm very excited to see where it goes. I'm also excited to see the transitions into some of the later stories in Seattle. And I'm very excited to see how that golfing scene will go out. That will require a lot of strong performances from everybody involved. That being said, what'd you think? Did you think it was a solid start to season 2? Did you think there were some things they definitely missed and could have done better? Either way, I want to know about it. Let me know. And I'd also appreciate what kind of content you'd want to see from these kind of videos. I could just do more breakdowns and recaps sort of like I did with this, but if there's more things I could include in the structure, definitely let me know. Either way, I'm excited to get into the rest of the season. I do live stream react to the episodes as they release, and even though I can't actually air the episode for those who want to watch, if you're interested in watching along, feel free to. Either way, thanks for the support, thanks for watching along, and remember, fixing a guitar doesn't fix your problems.